Hey guys, welcome back to Shop Life. Today's gonna be a DIY on how to replace your belts, your tensioners, and your pulleys, as well as the water pump. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start out by taking out the airbox and this little cowl, and then we'll take off the fan clutch with the fan blade or whatever, as well as the fan shroud. So in order to take this off, you're gonna have 3 push pins, one right here, and one right here. As you can see, his are already missing. So just gonna pull it out from right here. If you have difficulty taking it out, there's a tab in the front and 2 tabs in the back. So if you could just push the tabs in with the flathead, it'll be easier to pull out. Once you have that out, you're gonna take the airbox out. The easiest way to do this is to remove the 2 10mm bolts right here. Unplug your mass airflow sensor. Use a 6mm socket or a long flathead and undo this hose clamp right here. And then you can just pull this out from right there and lift up and out. Now we're gonna try to get this fan shroud out with the fan. In order to remove the fan, what you're gonna need is a 32mm open-ended wrench and a water pump holding tool. If you don't have that, you can use a pry bar, and I'll show you the method to do that now. All right, so the fan clutch is reverse threaded. That means in order to take it off, you have to go to the right to loosen it and to the left to tighten it. As you can see, I put the pry bar between the water pump pulley bolt and the fan clutch. That way when I go like this, the pry bar is also prying that way. So we'll loosen it and it's also holding the water pump pulley still. Alright, so if your fan clutch is actually like really on there and it won't come off like this one, I've actually tried to take this off before and it still didn't come off. What you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to take off just the blade section and take out the fan shroud with the blade. That way you have access to remove the water pump and stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so what we're gonna do first is you're gonna remove the bolt that's on the fan shroud on this side. It is a T25, and then you should have a push pin on this side that you can remove by taking out the little head and then pulling the whole pin out. But this one's missing, so we're not gonna have to worry about that. Let's go and loosen this off. Once you have that off, you're gonna go ahead and undo all your connectors. This one doesn't have the little ambient sensor that regulates the quality of the air. But if you did, you have a little connector right here that you have to take off. And then this is for the actual auxiliary fan. You just push these 2 tabs in and pull out. Now you can see that the fan shroud, you actually have some wiggle room now. So if you pull it back, you'll see there's 3 hex bolts holding the fan blade onto the clutch. We're gonna have to remove those bolts. So you wouldn't have to do this if your fan clutch and your fan came off the first time with using the water pump pulley holder or the pry bar method. Either way, if it would have came off, you could just take the fan shroud out and you can just skip ahead to whenever I get this fan off. Alright, so here are the 3 bolts holding the fan blades onto the clutch. They are a hex 5, so you just gotta get those loosened off. This is gonna be a really tough part to do because you really don't have that much space. This is all the space you have. So you have to get through here and get onto the actual fan clutch. Alright, so once you have all 3 bolts taken off, now you can just pull the blade off of the clutch and then pull the shroud up like this. So you have the blade out. There's the shroud. Alright, so now what you're going to have to do, we're going to take the belts off first. You have to remove the AC belt in order to get to the main drive belt. And if you are going to be changing your water pump, make sure you go ahead and buy a new fan clutch. At least the fan clutch, if not the whole fan assembly. That way you don't have to even worry about taking this old one off. If your fan clutch is stuck on your water pump, you're going to need a new water pump pulley and a new water pump if you plan to replace all of it. Alright, so in order to remove the belts, you're going to have to release the tension. To do that, you're going to need a 16mm socket and preferably a breaker bar or something that's long. That way you don't struggle down there to release the tension. So what we're going to do first is get the 16mm socket. on the actual tensioner, there should be a little groove for it. Ours is all the way at the bottom, and then you turn clockwise to release the tension. Once the tension's released, pull the belt off. Here's the AC belt. Make sure you are using a 6-point socket and not a 12-point socket. That way you don't risk stripping the actual assembly. Now we're gonna do the same thing for the main belt. The tensioner is right at the top, and the 16mm groove is right here. If yours does not have the actual groove for the 16mm socket, what you're gonna have to do is take off this dust cap off of the pulley itself, and you're gonna have a Torx bolt in there that you're gonna have to use to release the tension. And it's the same concept. You go clockwise, and that will release the tension. You can pull the belt off. All right, now we're gonna go and take the belt off. I have a video on how to route it if you forget when you're taking it off. As you can see, this belt is severely cracked, just like the AC belt. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and take off this water pump pulley. Even though the clutch is there, when we take the pulley off, we can slide it over a little bit so we have access to the water pump bolts. That way we could replace the water pump. We're also gonna be replacing this tensioner right here and this idler pulley right here. As you can hear, they're all bad. That one's bad, and this tensioner is also bad. So let's go ahead and take off the water pump first, since we're replacing that as well. Now we can go ahead and pull this pulley off. It's cool. Yeah, that shit is on there. Alright, as you see, this pulley is really stuck on there. There it goes. So if yours is stuck on there, you can pry on it through this hole between the oil filter housing and the thermostat. Just get your pry bar through there, get it behind this pulley and between the water pump, and pry on it. Now this will give us access to the bolts for the water pump. They're all going to be 10mm. There's going to be 4 total. In order to make this easier, we can go ahead and remove this pulley and tensioner, since our fan clutch is stuck on there. If it wasn't, we could go ahead and take the water pump out without taking off the tensioner. But since we're replacing these anyways, let's go ahead and take them off. Alright, so you're going to take off the dust cap if you have one. Just use a flathead and just pry it off. And this is a 16. And then we'll go ahead and remove the 2 13s for the tensioner. So let's go to get this off first. Now we're going to go ahead and remove this tensioner. It's held in with 2 13s, one on the top and one on the bottom. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and remove the 4 10mm bolts or nuts from the water pump. They're right behind this pulley. 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. I went ahead and removed the tensioner and the idler pulley, as you saw. So let's go ahead and get this off. Make sure you have some kind of drain pan or something underneath. That way all the coolant that comes out, you can catch it. Alright, now that you have all 4 bolts out, you're going to go ahead and pull this out. It might be a little hard. If it is, if you don't have your water pump pulley and your clutch on, there's 2 threaded holes on the actual water pump itself where you can thread in a 10mm bolt. Thread that in, that way it'll push the water pump out from the block and it'll make it easier for you to pull it out. There we go. Alright, so we went ahead and took out the old water pump. We're putting a new water pump. I've got another pulley and another fan clutch with the fan as well. If you don't, you're gonna have to take it somewhere, or if you have a vise or something, just mess with it until you get that old pulley off as well as the fan clutch if you're gonna be reusing that. I highly recommend you always get another pulley if you're in that situation, because more than likely you are gonna end up breaking it. So now let's put this new water pump in. As you can see, there's a new O-ring on here. You might have to put a little bit of coolant on there to lube it up so it slides in easier. You should have enough remainder on the actual water pump housing. So if you do, you should be fine. So let's go ahead and try to put it on. Make sure the holes line up. All right, so it's held in with 4 10mm nuts. Let's put those back on. If the heads on any of the nuts are stripped, make sure you replace them. That way you don't have difficulty removing it if you have to again in the future. Now let's go ahead and tighten these down. This would also be a good time to replace your thermostat. This one has been replaced recently, so we're not going to mess with it. But if yours hasn't, go ahead and do that as well. And your expansion tank if you would like to, and your radiator hoses. All because the cooling system's already open, so you're going to refill it anyways, so just go ahead and do all that at once. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take out the oil filter housing gasket. We're going to go ahead and do that. Alright, so now we've got the new tensioner, the two 13mm bolts that go with it. Let's go ahead and put that on. Now we're going to put the new pulley on. Make sure that this divot right here goes into the alternator when you're tightening. Now we're going to go ahead and put the new drive belt on. If you put a new tensioner on, you should already have a pin that's holding the tension. That way you can go ahead and route the belt and then pull the pin out. If you're reusing your old tensioner, make sure you put release the tension by going clockwise with the 16mm socket, and then go ahead and put the belt on and then release the tension. Once you have the main belt on, you can go ahead and put the AC belt back on. Now that you have that on, we're going to go ahead and put the fan and the shroud back on. And since it is reverse threaded, make sure you turn left to tighten. Once you have the fan and the shroud back in place, go ahead and put the Torx bolt, the T25, on the passenger side of the engine. Go ahead and put that bolt through the shroud into the radiator. Now go ahead and hook up any of the connectors that you had on the top or for the fan. Now that we have that done, we're going to go ahead and refill the cooling system. Make sure you undo your bleeder screw while you're refilling, and keep on filling until you see no more bubbles. Once you have all those air bubbles out and only solid water's coming in, go ahead and put the bleeder screw back on. Do not tighten it all the way, leave a couple turns left. That way we can bleed the rest of the system with the heater on. Alright, now what you're going to do is once you have all this buttoned back up, go ahead and turn the car on, turn the heater all the way full blast at the highest temperature. Once the car reaches operating temperature, all the coolant will start going to the heater core and will start bleeding the entire cooling system. So you're going to want to have the bleeder screw open just a few turns, that way all the air has space to come out. And once all the air is out, you'll start feeling the heat in the cabin properly. You can rev it up to about 2,000 to 3,000 and just leave it at that for a little bit, and you'll start feeling all the heat coming in. Once the heat is coming in nice and good, even when you're not revving, you can go ahead and close the bleeder screw, turn the car off, let it cool down all the way. Once it's cooled down, go ahead and top off the coolant. You can use distilled water or any NF or BMW coolant. And once that's done, you're good to go pretty much. So I would still monitor any leaks that you have. the next following days or whatever, and just check up on the fluid levels and make sure everything's good. If you did do the oil filter housing gasket like I did, this would be a good time for an oil change, or you can just top it off if you just recently did an oil change. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for more DIYs and vlogs.